Good morning, everybody. So, for the last little bit, we've been doing a series of lessons on various parts of the Old Testament, hovering kind of around Samuel, Proverbs, Psalms, kind of that area there. And the thing that's been really good about it is we'll do a lesson for the kids at 9:30, and then we get a chance for the adults to go a little bit more in depth into it later on. So today, the notes that I got were the word fool appears 47 times in Proverbs, and we'd like to discuss what a fool is in terms of one's relationship with God. So the last time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bump this real quick. We've got several scriptures that we're going to, so I want to make sure that those are all up there. We got one more page after that. I'll give this a few minutes while we go through the intro, and then we'll go ahead and get on to kind of the meat and potatoes of things. But the last time I was up here, Solomon was the topic, and he was a man who, obviously the stories said that he went down in history as one of the wisest men ever to have lived, at least initially, and then unfortunately the wheels kind of came off later on as he allowed his wives and concubines to kind of drag him to the dark side. So I'm going to move that over there for you. So his wisdom at that point was so profound that word of it spread over pretty much the whole known world. So today, though, we're going to be kind of inverting this, and there's an old saying that true wisdom is hard to find, but foolishness is not so bound. And as I was, putting the notes together for this, I went to go look at the OED to see what Oxford English Dictionary to see what their definition was of the word fool, and they wanted a $100 annual subscription to show it to me, and I said, I'm not that foolish. So I went to Webster's instead. Webster's has it down as a person lacking in judgment or prudence, or a harmlessly deranged person, or one lacking in common powers of understanding. So if we're going to have like two piles, and we're going to put fools in one side and not fools in the other, we've got people lacking in judgment or prudence, or harmlessly deranged people, or lacking in common powers of understanding. Unfortunately, we usually don't have these people that are lacking in judgment or prudence. A lot of times don't have signs around their neck to tell us that they are, lacking in, prudence. You can occasionally, catch a few of them if they're driving like a, 73 Ford Pinto. That's kind of foolish. They had a habit, for those that don't know, they had a habit of, lighting on fire at the slightest provocation. So, how did the scriptures define fool? This is Psalms. Goodness, let me see here if I've got It was the psalm that I had actually noted there at the beginning. Apparently, the slide there chopped it off. I apologize for that, but from the music director by David, fools say to themselves, there is no God. They sin and commit evil deeds. None of them does what's right. The Lord looks down from heaven at the human race to see if anyone who is wise, if there is anyone who is wise and seeks God. Everyone rejects God. They are all morally corrupt. None of them does what is right, not even one. All those who behave wickedly do not understand. Those who devour my people as if they were eating bread do not call out to the Lord. They are absolutely terrified, for God defends the godly. You want to humiliate the oppressed, even though the Lord is their shelter. And in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 23, as Paul shows that the unrighteous are condemned, he notes in verses 22 and 23 that although they being all the ungodly and unrighteous people he's talking about here, they claim to be wise, but they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for an image resembling mortal human beings, or birds, or four-footed animals, or reptiles. And at the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, in chapter 12, verse 13, Solomon himself says, having heard everything, I have reached this conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. That's wisdom. And Proverbs, the book itself starts with chapter 1, verse 7, fearing the Lord is the beginning of discernment, but fools have despised wisdom and moral instruction. So we're going to be spending most of the rest of the day in Proverbs now. Proverbs gets a bit more in depth with this, and if any of you have ever studied Proverbs, a good chunk of it is set out in kind of a compare and contrast format. They're going to start off with a good thing and comparing it to a bad thing, or a bad thing and then comparing it to a good thing. Every once in a while it'll be two good things or two bad things together just to kind of keep us on our toes. But we're going to go ahead and take a look now at foolishness in Proverbs. Note that we're going to be including some synonyms for fools and foolishness as well. So, characteristics of fools. The fool is unrighteous. He hates what is holy and righteous and good and loves evil. Proverbs 13:19, a desire fulfilled will be sweet to the soul, but fools abhor turning away from evil. Proverbs 10:23, carrying out a wicked scheme is enjoyable to a fool, and so is wisdom for the one who has discernment. The fool is unwise and does not possess wisdom. In Proverbs chapter 10, verse 21, the author says, teaching the righteous feeds many, but fools die for the lack of sense. And if I'm going too fast for any of this, if y'all are trying to keep up with me in Bibles back there, I can cheat. You know, when I put these together, you know, I've got it all copied and pasted into my lesson. But if somebody is actually out there trying to flip pages and keep up with me, you know, let me know and I'll slow down. So I'll go ahead and try and keep things a little slower for those that want to do that. So that's Proverbs 10:21, and the other thing here too is that'll go ahead. I'll try and keep those at least up on the screen so that you can write them down. And if anyone has or would like a copy of which scriptures I went into, we can go ahead and run those back at the beginning so that you can either take pictures of them, you know, with your cell phone if you want to, or just, you know, I can even, you know, give you my email address, or you can email me, and I'll be happy to email you the notes. So, anyway, the fool does not possess wisdom. And the fool actually, frankly, does not trust the person that's up here talking. A person with discernment, a wise person is going to go through and actually check the scriptures to make sure I know what I'm talking about, right? That's one of the things that I can tell you, you know, for me personally, and most of the folks that I know that I've talked to that come up here and speak, if there's one thing, I'm not scared of speaking in front of all of you all. You know, you're a big family to me, and I have no worries about standing in front of a crowd and speaking. The thing that scares me to death is coming up here and actually misstating a point of scripture and leading somebody astray, you know, by that. So that's why I'm always very, very picky about making sure that I've got my ducks in a row as best as I can, and to make sure that you all can see where I'm coming from, so that if I do make an error, I can go ahead and get that corrected. So the fool does not possess wisdom, and the fool is not capable of obtaining wisdom. Proverbs 17:16. What is the point of a fool having money in hand to buy wisdom when his head is empty? In 14:6, the scorner sought wisdom. There was none, but understanding was easy for a discerning person. And in 24:7, wisdom is unattainable for a fool. In court, he does not open his mouth. The fool is unteachable. Try as you like, attempting to teach a fool is frustrating at best and is often painful. Whenever a fool is faced with wisdom and instruction, he will reject it. Proverbs 1:29-32, or 29 through 32, because they hated moral knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord and did not comply with my advice, they spurned my rebuke. Therefore, they will, from the fruit of their way, they will be stuffed full of their own counsel. For the waywardness of the simpleton will kill them, and the careless ease of fools will destroy them. Now, children start out foolish, but it's not willful on their end because they don't have will, as a child of 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. They start out foolish, but they can be taught. In Proverbs 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. And unfortunately, that seems to be forgotten more and more these days. Bless you. In 15:5, a fool rejects his father's discipline, but whomever heeds reproof shows good sense. And in 17:21, whoever brings a fool into the world does so to his grief, but the father of a fool has no joy. But, obviously, there's a way to teach children so that they leave their foolishness behind, or else, there would be no people with discernment. We'd all be fools anyway. Dealing with fools is unwise and unpleasant. Remember the old saying that a fool will drag you down to their level and then beat you with their experience. Proverbs 14:7. Walk abreast with a foolish person, and you do not understand wise counsel. 17:12. It is better for a person to meet a mother bear being robbed of her cubs than to encounter a fool in his folly. And 22:10. Drive out the scoffer, and contention will go out. Even strife and dishonor will cease. Employing fools is also a problem. I actually put in a couple of weeks ago for the first supervisory position I have had in my adult life. And this is the part that scares the willies out of me. I'm told that being a supervisor is actually a fairly easy job if you've got, wise people working for you. But unfortunately, into each supervisory position, a few fools must fall. And I'm not looking forward to having to deal with that if I actually do get the promotion. Proverbs 26:6. Like cutting off the feet or drinking violence, so is sending a message by the hand of a fool. And in 26:10, like an archer who wounds at random, so is the one who hires a fool or hires any passerby. Fools must be dealt with differently than those who are wise. If you have ever had any sort of supervisory role, like I was just saying, you know that every one of your employees is an individual in and of themselves. Your approach in dealing with your employees must be, individualistic. You have to tailor how you supervise each individual to the individual that's being supervised. Fools will react differently to correction than a wise person will. Proverbs 9:7-8. Whoever corrects a mocker is asking for insult. Whoever reproves a wicked person receives abuse. Do not reprove a mocker, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise person, and he will love you. And in Proverbs 26:4-5, which apparently cut off to the bottom of that page there too, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you yourself be like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own opinion. So this quotation is a little weird. On its face, the scriptures are doing one thing and then completely inverting it less than one paragraph later. So, for me, this is one, I think all of us need to pray and meditate on. But when I looked at it, I looked at it as saying I'd avoid answering a fool if he were by himself or in a position to immediately influence others. See that comment above about, the fool dragging you down to his level. But if you're in a situation where that fool can influence others, and those others aren't seeing it through the fool's folly, someone else may need to point it out to those others. The point there is that the fool isn't going to accept correction, but the others that are around the fool or that see the fool's activities, may go ahead and listen to you, may be salvageable by you if you can go ahead and get to them in time. So we're going to go a little off topic here for a minute, but we're going to kind of fold this back in. So if you think back to the series of lessons we had a while back on being Christ-like, I and others ended up talking about 2 commandments. Matthew 22:37-40. Jesus said to him, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." So when you look at things from this perspective, idolatry is anything that gets in the way of that first commandment. You know, you've got the whole point behind loving God with all your heart and soul and mind is loving God first with all your heart and soul and mind, right? So the sins that are typically enumerated, like in Exodus, the Ten Commandments, and other places, typically just boil down to idolatry, because you end up loving, some people love money more than they love God, so, you can look at it, as greed is idolatry of money. Same with adultery. Illicit sexual relationships are loved more than God by some people, so, they're putting those relationships ahead of their love of God. Alcohol and drug abuse, it's the same thing there. So with foolishness or folly, we're talking about the idea of the sin of idolatry through egotism. Fools truly believe themselves to be smarter than God, if they even believe in God at all. Wiser than God, more worthy of worship than God, and they've made the conscious decision to subordinate God's wishes and plans to their own. Because of this, God's love and wisdom appears as foolishness to the fool. For the message, in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, Paul says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to those of us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Fools see the power of God and make the conscious decision to ignore it. And the power of God through the death of his Son is all that can save us." So what does this come down to? Well, probably the best thing at this point to say is that if you're not a child of God, you're a fool. Don't put your wisdom before God's wisdom. Listen intently to what he's telling you. Satan would have us all fools, standing one day in front of the judgment seat of God's Son, saying, "But Jesus, I looked at your scriptures and they just didn't make any sense to me. They were foolish. So I ignored them. I was a good person anyway, right?" And, as we've said repeatedly, being good doesn't get you into heaven. Only obedience to the Lord's gospel can get you into heaven. So if you're here today and you haven't obeyed the Lord's gospel yet, you need to be baptized for the remission of your sins and confess his name before men. We'd be very much happy to help you do that. There are elders here that will help you work that out. We have water here to do it. And we would invite you to come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.